reel to reel, the reel to reel, and KOTESOL National Conference. Before we begin, I would like to just make sure that you know that we are recording. And actually, if let's see, can you stop the recording right now? Thank you. I met Cyrus Nomozu Sedna in the office of the summer community that we both were part of. Cyrus was just out of high school, and I was just out of college, 20 years out of college, that is. And I worked with Cyrus on several musicals that I directed for the community. I was impressed with him, and over 20 years later, I still am. And no wonder, the name Cyrus means the sun. The phrase that comes to mind when thinking of Cyrus is movie maven. According to the Merriam-Webster dictionary, some synonyms of maven are adept, artist, authority, cognoscente, connoisseur, expert, guru, maestro, master, meister, scholar, virtuoso, and wizard. But lest he become too big-headed, the dictionary continues by suggesting see also freak. Without further ado, here is movie maven Cyrus Nomozu Sedna with Babylon, the film and the making of it.
Thank you very much, David. Thank you for that lovely introduction. Good evening, everyone. My name is Cyrus Nomozu Sedna, and as David very accurately pointed out, I am a movie freak, and I've been a freak for a very long time. And before I get started, just a very special thanks to Ria for asking me to present this evening. I owe her an apology for being very slow with my responses. Unfortunately, work has just been busy. As the saying goes, when it rains, it pours. But I'm glad I was available to give this presentation this evening. Just a little bit about me before I begin the film. I have been running my own multimedia business, Solely Consultants, for the past 16 and a half years now. And while we focus less on production and more on localization, specifically the localization of Japanese content, mostly into English and Chinese Mandarin, I've been a lifelong film fan. And so over the course of my career, I've tried figuring out how I could make my own film. And as you all know, filmmaking is not only time consuming, it's also financially it's financially draining. It's just a very expensive thing to take part in. So I figured, what can I do to make something with my own money? And before I go any further, I'd like to show the result of that. So without much ado, here is Babylon. But let me open the file first.
And this is the movie that Cyrus created.
Yes, sir. Sumimasen. Beer. Beer. Okay, okay.
Cyrus?
Oh, I think we have to optimize video for sound. Sorry, can we pause 1 second and try again?
Sure.
Cyrus, you need to stop, and we need to, you did optimize for sound before, but I think you'll need to do it again.
Okay, my apologies for that. Let's see, it was go to share screen.
Then at the bottom.
Okay, optimize screen share for video clip. Sorry about
share
that.
sound and share
Okay.
sound.
And share computer sound. Okay, sorry about that. I'll start it from the beginning. My
No
apologies.
problem. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
すみません。Beer.
Beer.
Okay. Okay.
Enjoy.
ありがとう。Hi. Hi.
Hello.
Do you come here a lot? Do you come here a lot?
Yeah, yes.
Okay. Yeah, it's really a nice place, isn't it? I really like the atmosphere.
Sorry, no English.
Oh. Oh, okay.
Sorry.
Oh, that's okay. Gomen.
大丈夫。
Okay. このお店本当雰囲気いいよね。いや、このお店本当雰囲気いいよね。
はい。っていうか、日本語話せるんじゃないですか。
うん、これのおかげで。
何それ。
通訳装置だよ。僕がこのようにパネルを日本語に設定して話すと、僕が言うことを全て日本語に変えてくれるんだ。
すごい。
でしょ。
口まで日本語みたいになってる？
いや、みたいところが完全日本語。
すごい。しかも私が言ってることも全部わかってるの？
全部わかる。
すごいね、これ。どうなってるの？
いや、それは秘密だよ。使ってみる？
いいの？
Go ahead.
英語に戻ってる。
Okay, take this. Put it right over here. Around in your throat. Yeah, there we go. Okay, 1 second. Say something.
That's not really a language. Oh my god! This is amazing! This is amazing!
Right?
Wow, I'm speaking English!
Yes, you are.
Oh, I really wanted this during my English exams.
I bet. But actually, that's not all. There's more. Go ahead.
是让我说点什么？哇，这是哪国话？这个太棒了！还有其他国家的语言吗？
Please don't touch it without my permission. Sorry, can I?
这是
Yes. Okay, thank you. Gomen, あんまりいじらないでくれないかな。かなり繊細なんで。
だよね、つい。
いや、大丈夫大丈夫。気持ちはよくわかるよ。
だってこんなすごい機械見たことないもん。
でしょ？これでさ、世界旅行しようと思うんだ。
それは楽しそ
ね、もうこれがあればどの国に行っても and can talk to whoever I want.
英語に戻っちゃってるよ。
What did you say?
そうだよね。English.
English. Oh.
Speak.
Oh, okay. That's weird. How about now? That would be no. Okay. Let's try this. Creo que está bien.
それは何語？
¿Qué dijiste? ¿Por qué estoy hablando en español? No quiero hablar en español. Quiero hablar en japonés. Akonkamon. Ish, ¿qué no hochana? ¿Qué pasday? Daj no, igraj no. To zdaj še nikoli nisem videl tako krasne deklice. Daj no, potrudi,いい加減にしてよこのポンコツ。
日本語に戻ってる。
え、日本語？
うん。
日本語。あ、よかった。もうどうなるかわかんないとこだった。
でもなんか変だよ。
あら
少し。
やだ、ちょっとこれって日本語の女性設定になってない？
そんなのもあるの？
やだ。
すごいな。
もうちょっと待ってちょうだいね。
はい。
もうだから私は普通に話したいの。ちゃんと喋らせてください。あんたったらもう私どうしたらいいかわからないわ。
大丈夫よ、そんなに気にならないし。
いや、私は気になるわよ。ちょっと待ってちょうだい。だからあんたちゃんとしなさいだがにポロミシ。Ami problem je ami ticore dieci. Mais non, on peut travailler sérieusement là. Vamos, muévete mi chico.
すいません。勘定お願いします。
はい、ただいま。1000円ちょうどです。
Wait, please just listen to what I have to say. Look, you don't know me, but I go to the coffee shop you work at from time to time, and you've always been really nice to me. I've been wanting to talk to you for quite some time, but you don't speak English, I don't speak Japanese. What's the point, right? And that's why I invented this. Didn't work, obviously. But I don't think that's important. I think there's something that transcends communication, that invisible connection that people have. And every time you serve me coffee, I felt like I've had that connection with you. And if you give me a chance, I'm sure you'll feel that you have that connection with me. So what do you say?
ごちそうさま。
はい、毎度。
すみません。お会計。
はい、ただいま。650円です。
This device is going to work. This device is going to work. This device... Oh, who am I kidding?
650円です。
あとすいません、領収書もらえますか？
はい、わかりました。
ありがとうございます。
お客さん、また日本語上手くなったね。
え、どういうことですか？お、治った。あ、やべ。
ちょっとお客さん。
Keep the change. And that was the film. Hope you all enjoyed it. And I'm glad to see you're all still awake. So on that note, I'd like to continue with the presentation, specifically how I came around to making this film on a very small budget and a very tight schedule. The genesis of the film was quite simple, which was I wanted to date the leading lady. That's pretty much what it came down to. So I thought to myself, what's a project that I can work on that the two of us can take part in? And I was thinking about what did we have in common? And that was that we're both native level English and Japanese speakers. We're both born and raised in Japan. We both went to international school. We both studied in the US, so we could both speak English and Japanese at a native level. So I was thinking, okay, how do I work with that skill, which, if you ask me, is more valuable than any special effect that I know of? So I asked her, would you like to do this concept with me? And she said, yeah, it sounds like fun. Let's do it. So once I got her okay, the next step was hiring an actor to play the bartender. I wanted someone who really looked like he ran a bar. And as luck would have it, the actor who played him, I happened upon him in a short film made by a colleague of mine. And in this short film, he played a regular salaryman. He wore a suit, but his face just screamed, I own a drinking joint. So I contacted him and said, would you like to play a bartender in a short film that I'll be shooting in one night? And he said, yeah, it sounds like fun. Let's do it. So that was it. The cast was in place, the three of us. And once that was done, the next step was finding a location. And this is where my co-star Shizuka really came in handy because she worked at NHK, the Japan Broadcasting Service. So she knew a number of bars and restaurants in the area. And she took me to a place that had been open for less than a year. And that's actually one trick to targeting places to film in is you pick places that haven't been open for very long, because that way the owners are more eager and willing to receive any and all sort of publicity. If you speak to established venues, they'll say, well, you can only film at this time and we charge this much. It's quite draconian. But with new places, because they want the publicity, they want customers, they're open to just about anything. So they're very, very flexible. And in this case, because the owner knew Shizuka and because Shizuka vouched for me, I got the okay to film in there. The only provision being that we had to shoot the whole thing in one night. We shot it on the second night of a 3-day weekend, which was Saturday, Sunday, Monday. So he told us, I won't be open on Sunday night, so I'll let you have the keys, but you have to be out of there first thing Monday morning so that I can open the place on Monday night. And that is another thing that's absolutely crucial when you rent a venue to film in is don't be a nuisance. I mean, they're already being very generous by letting you film there, so interfere with their business as little as possible. So once I had the location secured, I had to make sure I could get all the shots I needed in one night. And once the script was done in early December of 2014, I think I wrote the whole thing in about 2 or 3 weeks. I went to the venue a couple times at night with my camera operator to figure out spaces where we could put the camera and lighting in. As you can see, it was a very small place, so we had to figure out just, what places can we actually put a camera without it getting in the way. And in order to achieve this, I had to do something that I'd been absolutely terrified of doing, which is drawing. Namely, this was the first project I worked on where I drew storyboards. And my storyboards were basically stick figures. It was something like, okay, man is here, woman is here, that's counter, camera goes here. It was as bare bones as it could be. I did it with a pencil on a piece of used paper, but it helped because the cameraman looked at it and said, oh, okay, so you want me to put the camera here? Yep, no problem. I can do this, I can do that. Long story short, it was just preparation. We did as much as we could do beforehand to make sure we could get the whole film done in one night. And after I did that, after I designed storyboards so I knew exactly what shots I wanted for what parts in the script, the next step, and this was absolutely crucial to making the film, was figuring out what other languages I could incorporate into the film. All I did know is that it's about a guy who invents a device that allows him to speak in the native language of the girl he's in love with. And of course, the machine malfunctions because if it doesn't, there'd be no movie. It'd be quite boring. So when I was trying to figure out what languages can I incorporate other than English and Japanese, I ended up picking languages that were already spoken at a native level by my friends and colleagues. And it came down to Mandarin Chinese, Spanish, Bengali, Slovenian, and French. So we used a total of 7 languages in this film. And in order to figure out what languages to speak where, I looked through the script and selected specific areas. I figured, okay, I'd like this to be in Bengali, I'd like this to be in Spanish, I'd like this to be in Slovenian. And once I had that in place, I contacted my colleagues and asked them to translate those lines into their native language. And this was the most important part. After they translated it, I took out my phone and said, great, now I'd like you to record this twice, once in a slow, flat voice, and once how you would say it naturally with emotion. And once I had all that material ready, basically by the end of 2014, I had the location, we'd set a date, I had the cast, I had the crew, and I had all of the languages locked. And the reason why I decided I wanted all of this material ready by the end of the year was so that I could spend the entire first week of 2015, namely the New Year holidays, listening to the lines spoken by my colleagues 2 hours a day. And by doing this for 2 hours a day, I was able to phonetically memorize all of the lines that were spoken in languages besides English and Japanese, because it was crucial to get my delivery and accent as close to authentically native as possible. And to this day, I honestly don't know if I succeeded, but I can actually speak all of these lines to you right now in Bengali, in French, in Spanish. That's how deeply ingrained the lines were in my head. I memorized them so thoroughly that to this day, I remember all of them. I can just give them to you on the spot. So once the new year started, I met with my co-star Shizuka a few times to run lines. And I don't know if you noticed, but the whole part where we have our interaction, from when I say hi to her to when the machine malfunctions and I disconnect it, it's pretty much done entirely in one shot. The camera only cuts away once to a close-up of her looking baffled, and that was due to a technical error. Unfortunately, it was a mistake I made because I didn't have time to actually check any of the footage we shot. I just asked the cameraman, how did that look? He said, yep, looks great. And then we moved on to the next thing. So that was a mistake I noticed in editing, and I went, ooh, got to cover it up somehow. And fortunately, we had that shot of her in close-up, so we cheated a little bit there. But otherwise, that whole interaction was done in one shot. So long story short, Shizuka and I both had to have our lines down pat so we could do the whole thing in one take. And speaking of Shizuka, one important thing to keep in mind with filmmaking is the saying, anything that can go wrong will go wrong. And in this case, it was not with any equipment, but with her. I mean, she was fantastic. She showed up and she did a great job. As you can see, it was a good performance. But she'd been pulling all-night shifts at work, which is what happens when you're young and you're working at NHK. You're at the bottom of the pecking order, so you're the one who has to stay the latest most nights. And she was pulling a lot of all-nighters at work. So on the day of filming, she sent me a text that said, my stomach is killing me, but I'll take some medicine and we'll be there as planned. So this told me I had to get her scenes out of the way fast so that she could go home early and get some rest because she was due back at work the next day. So we basically decided we were going to film all the scenes that she was in first, and then she could go and we could film all the scenes that were either just me or me and the bartender. Now, the actual interpretation device that I use, this is the very definition of DIY. Basically, I borrowed a colleague's tablet, and he gave me an old USB cable that he no longer used. So I cut that cable in half. And my co-star, I don't know where she was able to get this. I think she knew someone who worked in a hospital, but she was able to get one of those pads that typically doctors use. And we cut the lower portion of that cable off, and we connected the cable with the pad to the cut-off USB cable with duct tape. It was really just as simple as that. And you'll notice in a few shots while we're speaking, we have our fingers on our throats the whole time. That's because after a while, the flap kept peeling off. So we had to just keep it on there somehow. You know, it was just, you have to do whatever you can to get the shot you need. And that's what we ended up doing. As far as the tablet itself, there was no power in it whatsoever. We didn't connect it to anything. The screen was blank the entire time. If you notice, the camera never once focuses on what's in the tablet. It shoots it from the back or from the side the whole time. So, you know, it was just a matter of just play pretend. That's basically what we did. And as far as that crucial shot with Shizuka and myself that makes up the bulk of the film goes, I think we ended up doing over 10 takes because I mean, again, it's a very difficult take to pull off because we both speak multiple languages. We'd sometimes get our lines wrong. We'd sometimes forget our lines. And actually, the final shot that ended up making it into the film, 20% of the dialogue in there is unscripted. It was just improvised on the spot by either Shizuka or myself, and we just reacted accordingly. Eventually, we found our way back to what was actually scripted dialogue, thank God, and we were able to get a shot that would work in the finished product. Once we were able to get that one complicated shot out of the way, the rest of the film was a relative breeze to shoot. In fact, it was such a breeze that I ended up filming an additional, basically a promotional trailer to the film. We actually had enough time to shoot a promotional trailer to the film, and I'm just gonna play that for all of you now. It was basically done in the style of a really cheap, really badly produced infomercial. So without much ado, here it is. And one sec, let me just open the clip. Hi. Have you ever been in that situation where you're in a foreign country and the woman of your dreams is standing right in front of you just waiting to be swept off her feet, but that pesky language barrier keeps getting in the way? Hi. The stars are beautiful tonight, aren't they? I'm Victor Costigan Hernandez. As a consummate world traveler, like yourself, I've found myself in this predicament one too many times. That's why I invented Babel.
Using Babel is easy. First, open up the device. Next, take your talk pad and put it on your throat, like this. Finally, type in a language, in this case Japanese, and tap the screen. Now, watch what happens.
日本語喋れるようになったよ。
With Babel, you can now have conversations both social
だけどね、AKB より SKE の方が可愛いかな。
and intellectual.
けどなんで48にしたんだろう。
You can even share it with your partner. And have stimulating conversations together.
Like, Justin was too cool for Selena?
Word. Babel. Because why learn the language when you really don't have to?
Side effects include increased ego, God complex, and unwarranted self-esteem. USB sold separately.
So basically, when we took a break in filming, we decided to go ahead and shoot that. And I figured rather than cut a trailer, I'm just going to use that to promote the film. And I got a haha response. Thank you very much. I'm glad you liked it, Fiona. Appreciate it. And as you can tell, it's quite dated. We shot this in early January 2015. So we talk about things like AKB48 and Justin Bieber and Selena Gomez. This was when I think they just broken up. Doesn't really matter, but it was just all part of the material that was topical for the time. So once we were done filming the trailer, my co-star headed home, and I guess the timing couldn't have been any better because she apparently had fallen unconscious in the cab, and she woke up. When she woke up, she was in hospital due to exhaustion, apparently. But the good news is that she did fully recover and told me later on that she actually doesn't remember having taken part in the film at all. That's how gone she was on the day of filming. And she told me it actually worked better in hindsight because if she had been more conscious, then she would have been really nervous and probably wouldn't have done as good a job. But because she was already operating on fumes at that point, she just went along with it. And yeah, as you can see, it was a good performance. Like, she'd never acted before, and it was she came off quite natural in the finished product. And one thing is that I do have a background in theater and in improvisation. And one thing that I learned is absolutely important when I've written scripts and directed them is that you shouldn't follow the dialogue 100%. If somebody decides to ad lib a line and it works within the context of the film, just go with it. I know some writers are absolutely precious with their dialogue and they say, no, you have to say it exactly the way I wrote it. I don't really consider myself a professional writer. So what I tell my co-stars is, if you as your character would say this in a different way, just do it. And if it works, we'll keep it. If not, we'll just stick with the script. And so if there's one constant in the short films that I've made, it is that in general, the acting from cast members is good because I let them do whatever they want. I trust them as professionals. I trust their instinct. I trust that they'll do what they're comfortable with. It's a team effort after all. And yeah, so that was my co-star. And it was actually a good thing we shot the film in early January because it got very, very hot on set. Basically, to give it the impression of a properly functioning drinking joint, we filled a cooking pot with water and had it boil constantly throughout filming. And this ended up creating some nice atmosphere. You can see steam rising from the background when he enters the joint in the beginning. And that shot when he says, this device is going to work, there's a beautiful dewy presence on the windows behind him with the light hitting it from the back. I really liked that shot. It added some atmosphere to it. But the cost of that was that it got very hot on set. And this was in early January. So we actually had to open the door a few times in between shots to let some cool air in so that we could all breathe again. And at one point, actually, the camera operator's camera overheated and shut down. So we had to let it cool off so we could continue shooting the film. But fortunately, because it had been planned so meticulously, we actually ended up finishing it ahead of schedule, despite the fact that we even shot a trailer in the middle of shooting. And because of the tightness of the space, instead of having a boom mic, we hired the sound operator who I hired came up with a very simple Zoom type mic, just a device that's about the size of an iPhone. And he put a mic muffler on it and he recorded the sound using that. So in the scene where you see myself and my co-star having that long conversation, he was actually hiding beneath the counter, sticking the mic up just far enough so that it would capture our audio, but you couldn't see it. And for all other shots, like the shot where I'm confessing my feelings to her, that was done with a pin mic. As you can tell, the audio isn't particularly good in this film. It's definitely not one of the better audio people who I'd worked with, but it was a very important lesson to me that audio in films is very, very difficult. And if you're going to do audio, you have to do it right. You have to find someone who knows what they're doing. This guy was a very nice guy and he did the best he could, but obviously he didn't have enough experience in the field yet. As you can tell by the finished product, there's a lot of weird ambient noise, just like a constant sound in the background, which when I first saw it, I went, oh, that does sound kind of cheap. But in the context, it worked. I mean, you can hear all the dialogue properly. You can hear the music. It doesn't affect the film too badly, but it did give it a bit of a cheap feel. This was also the case with the camera work. There are some shots that have a lot of shadows in them, and this was due to, frankly, poor lighting. But because it was a very small set, we didn't have a monitor on set that I could look at to see what each shot looked like after we got it. And because I was pressed for time, because I knew we had to get this done by 5 a.m. the following morning, I didn't bother checking what the shots looked like. I just trusted my camera operator and said, if it looks good to you, it's good for me, let's move on. And so when we got all the shots we needed, we were done at 5 a.m. I asked my editor to come come to set at 5 a.m. so that I could transfer all the data from the camera to his computer and he could start editing the film. And that's when I saw the footage for the first time and I freaked out going, oh, Jesus, the lighting is horrible in this. What was that guy thinking? And I started panicking. We did the best we could with what we got in the end. But a very important lesson that I learned from that was, even though you trust the camera operator, always look at the footage that's shot so that you're okay with it. And this is regardless of whether you're playing the lead role in the film or otherwise. If you're the director, make sure you look at each shot to make sure it's okay. I mean, the camera operator will say it looks fine. You might have a different opinion. So that was an important lesson I got out of this. And ultimately, the biggest reason why I'm a firm believer in working within the resources you have is because, like anything else, filmmaking is a learning process. And, you'll make mistakes every single time. So if you're going to make mistakes, why not make a series of small mistakes that don't affect the final product? You can still finish the film and screen it and show it to people, but at least you'll know, okay, I'll make sure I don't make this mistake in the future. Whereas if you make a mistake on an expensive production, you may never get another chance to make anything again. And that's why I'm a firm believer in just, if you can finance your own film, work within limited resources, it's the best way to learn how to do things, and you get a little bit better each time. I just received a comment asking where was the film first shown. It was screened at the Sapporo International Short Film Festival, which, for those of you who've never been, it's a film festival I highly recommend. It takes place in Sapporo, Hokkaido every year around early mid-October. And it's just a showcase of, indeed, one more reason to go to Sapporo. And it's the screening area where they screen all the films is right in the middle of a shopping district. So there are tons of restaurants in the area that you can go to. It's a fantastic venue. And they screen, I think, about 80 short films from Japan and overseas. And it's a fascinating collection. Some of the films they showcase are so well produced, you wonder, geez, why is this filmmaker not better known? And some of the ones they showcase were clearly made by students on a very limited budget, but it shows great potential from them. But everything from the good, the bad, the weird to the downright just baffling, you can watch at Sapporo International Short Film Festival. And they were generous enough to pick this film up, which I really appreciated. They really liked it. When we screened it in the theater, the audience was predominantly Japanese. And when I say my first line in Japanese, that got the biggest laugh in the audience, which is strange because I didn't think it was a particularly funny line, but I think it's to Japanese people, it's the fact that I suddenly start speaking in Japanese that they just thought was hilarious. And so it was great to experience that in a venue together with 200 other people. But the biggest lesson, and before I go into the biggest lesson I learned from this film, is that I had very little to work with, but what I had to work with had a lot to offer. For starters, thanks to my co-star, I was able to find the venue to shoot the film in. She was able to help me create the device that we used, the interpreting device. And if it wasn't for her, I wouldn't have been able to make the film. If any of you are wondering, nope, we never ended up dating. I asked her out and she said, no, I don't think of you that way. But I'll always be grateful to her for helping me make this film. If I hadn't had a crush on her, I would have never made the film. So thank you very much, Shizuka, for motivating me to make this film. And the most important lesson that I learned making this was, no matter how good the idea is, you have to find the best technicians possible. And in this industry, there are many talented people. And as long as you make it clear to them that you're self-financing the film, you're working with limited resources, but you respect them as professionals and you will pay them as, well, I wouldn't say as little as you can, but you will pay them as reasonable amount as you can with the budget you're working with. They will, for the most part, they will say, yes, some very, very talented people have worked with me for very little money. But the most important thing of all is you have to pay them something. Because if you don't, well, as the saying goes, you get what you pay for. So if you pay nothing, that's precisely what you're going to get. So
remaining time, 5 minutes.
Okay. And that's more or less the gist of how I was able to make, it's a science fiction film, basically. This device doesn't exist. It's probably never going to exist for a long time. But it was basically how I was able to make something that I could call a science fiction film, from writing to casting to producing to filming to editing, all in the space of 2 months for a budget that came to 200,000 yen. And on that note, I will end my presentation. Thank you all very much for listening. And for those of you who have any questions, I will take them right now. I'll also open the chat window. If any of you would like to ask questions on chat, we can do that. There is a question from Annika saying, what ended up being more important to planning than you thought? Oh, that's a very good question. What ended up being more important to planning than you thought? I think it was finding better people to work with, because I hired a camera operator and I hired a sound guy, but I hadn't exactly asked for their portfolio. I hadn't asked for past projects that they'd worked on. They told me they were professionals and I took them at their word. What I learned is, in the future, if you're going to make something and you want to hire technicians, you have to ask them for a portfolio, because if what they send you is not very good, you're not going to want to work with them. But if somebody sends you something that looks amazing and they're willing to work on your film for the budget that you're willing to offer, great, you're in luck. Go ahead and hire that person. So that was definitely more important. What ended up being less important than you expected? Absolutely nothing. I think everything was important. Everything from the storyboarding to going to the location beforehand and figuring as much as you can beforehand. And we were lucky because where we were filming, it was in Shibuya. So there was a convenience store nearby where I could get food for the cast and the crew if they got hungry in the middle of shooting. That's one thing. You have to always have food on these sets because it's exhausting work. People are going to get hungry. And if people get hungry, they get cranky, their margin of error goes up. They're not able to do as much. So always make sure people are fed. And from Ria, question is, what projects are you working on now? How do you envision them? The last short film I made was 4 years ago. And since then, I've come up with two ideas. One is essentially going to be a one-person show that'll feature me. And it's once again going to utilize English and Japanese. I do have a rough idea of what it's going to be about, but I can't really reveal that at this point. I'm hoping to be able to film that next year. And another one that I'm hoping to film next year is what's going to end up being the first adapted screenplay I've written. I read a short story by a well-known Japanese writer last year, and it was traumatic in a good way. I was almost in tears by the time I ended up reading it, by the time I finished reading it. And I told myself, I'd love to make this into a film. It's such a visually strong short story, and it's something I really want to make into a film. It's going to be a challenge because I've never written an adapted screenplay before, and it's going to be all in Japanese. But once it's done, I'll have to get her permission before I can film it. But hopefully, fingers crossed, I'll get her permission and I can film that next year. So I'm hoping to complete those two short films by the end of 2022. And from Risky, kindly tell us the processes of writing the multilingual script. Did you work with translators, interpreters? Indeed, I did. Earlier in my presentation, I talked about how I contacted native speakers in each of the languages that I ended up using. I met with each one of them and I gave them the lines of dialogue that I wanted to speak in their language. I said, please translate this, but more importantly, I needed to know what those lines sounded like in their native cadence. So I had them record each of those lines on my iPhone, and I spent 7 days listening to each line 2 hours a day, and basically ended up phonetically memorizing all of them. So that was the process that I went through to get 7 languages down. Another question, can you remember the first inspiration that got you making films? What was the catalyst that made you really go for it? The first inspiration, well, I've been wanting to make films ever since I was in high school, but I had zero understanding of the process of making films. And I never went to film school. I never really studied film, but as luck would have it, when I started working in the media industry in Japan, because I'm bilingual, I was hired as an English supervisor or as an interpreter for a number of projects. And so I basically got to hang around film sets and watch people work. And what I love about film technicians is they're very generous people because they know that they're in the background and they're not really appreciated for what they do. So when someone comes up to them asking questions like, why did you place the camera there? Why did you do that with the boom mic? Can you explain? They're more than happy to tell you. Film technicians are some of the most generous people I've come across. And if you ask them about their craft, they will tell you all you need to know about it. So basically, I started taking a notebook to film shoots, and during breaks in filming, I would ask questions and I would just write them down. And that gave me the confidence to more or less say, okay, I think I know how to make a film now. Now I just need to hire professionals to help me make it. And so that was the inspiration, really. And I think ultimately, just like with any form of expression, you say, this is a film that I'd like to see sometime. Why don't I make it? And but because it's a very expensive thing to do, I'm a firm believer in just, making something that you can afford and that you can show to people. So I always make sure I write scripts that I can afford to make with my own money. That's basically how it begins. My questions about the copyright stuff, how you write the ownership of this film in case you upload at YouTube. That is a good question. And the answer is I haven't uploaded it to YouTube. It's available only as a private link on my Vimeo account. So if you view it, you need the link, but you also need a password. I would like to figure out how to more actively pursue copyright stuff. I think that's a very important skill to learn, and it's something that I'd like to study in the future. So Young-sung, thank you very much for asking that question. It's definitely something I'd like to look into. And yeah, it's 7:47 now. So if there are no other questions,
There are a few things that came up
Yes.
earlier. One, there are many comments that said really cool, wow. Rhea had a comment about Babylon. Would you like to repeat that, Rhea?
Oh, I just mentioned that we almost included Babylon in the name of our conference in the same spirit of
oh
trying
wow,
to get into that groove between languages. I'm really fascinated about getting into that space. It's a vulnerable space, and it's
Yes.
also a mysterious space. So maybe what made you choose the name?
basically, well, the phrase Babylon, let's keep talking, let's Babylon. And I changed the spelling of Babel deliberately to the Tower of Babel because, of course, the Tower of Babel was a whole bunch of people speaking languages that nobody could understand. And that's what led to chaos. And so, yeah, it was basically just a simple pun, a play on words. This person creates an interpreting device so he can talk to the woman of his dreams, but it ends up malfunctioning and it creates a Tower of Babel scenario, which leads her to just leaving the place at the end because she can't understand a word he says.
And one more comment was by David Schaefer, and it was written in Hangulgo. So if you could
Ooh.
please explain what you said, David. David Schaefer.
His camera looks frozen, but it was Jamie Asasayo, which means really fun and entertaining and cool.
Oh,
Okay,
thank
good.
you so much.
Exclamatory. Yeah.
There were a lot of nice comments, and I'm going to forward them to Cyrus. I've saved it, and I will forward it to him. I think we are basically finished. We have one more thing to do, and that is if everybody could unmute your microphones. Everybody, please unmute your microphones. And let's have a rousing round of applause to Cyrus Sedna.
감사합니다.
And the next thing let's see here. Ashley, are you there?
Yes, I'm here. Hello.
Sorry,
I just got home and eating dinner. Hello.
Oh no, Ashley, if you want to, if you would like to give some information on the next activity, which starts in 10 minutes.
I think we're just planning to have a watch party for some of the films after this. So stick around if you like.
So they stick around here, right here on this.
Oh, that I'm not sure of. Rhea?
Yeah, I can
Sorry.
speak to that. So it will be in the same room if you want to hang out. We will start out by opening up the Discord channel, and we have a variety of films made by students or non-students, and there are about 80 some minutes of films available. So first of all, we're going to show you how to vote for all the films and get you set up, and then we're just going to watch. So you can grab your snacks, and it will just be like a popcorn eating, watching kind of day. So you're welcome to join for a little bit or a lot if you wish. Thanks.
So again, let's have a round of applause for Cyrus. Thank you very much, Cyrus.
Thank you so much, everyone. This was a lot of fun. And thank you again, Rhea, for putting this together. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure. We look forward to seeing you next time as well.
Thank you.
Thank you, Cyrus.
Then